right, let's start. So first of all, thank you so much everyone for being here. I'll start with a quick round of introductions of our fellow panelists and myself. Starting in the extreme left, Tiago, would you like to introduce yourself?
Yeah, thank you. So I'm Tiago Rodriguez. I'm the CEO of the Wireless Broadband Alliance, and it's a pleasure to be here today and share a little bit of the work of the Alliance and how we have been collaborating with several members from India.
Khetan?
Khetan Gajjar from Telecom Infra project, and I look after the OpenWiFi program. So look forward to a discussion between the between WBA and the Indian ecosystem.
Udit?
I'm Udit Merozra from Sham Spectra, and we are a managed service provider, and we've got a large OpenWiFi deployment.
Thank you. And my name is Sandeep Kohli. I'm part of Network Infrastructure Ecosystems team at Meta. So let's kick this off with a quick background of what we are going to cover in this panel. So typically we are going to be talking about OpenWiFi and the journey of OpenWiFi in India and how that journey sort of takes care of the emerging markets, the challenges which are there in the emerging markets, and also the global markets, so to say, in terms of OpenWiFi. So as we know, OpenWiFi is a collaborative ecosystem of delivering an open and disaggregated Wi-Fi stack, which brings in hardware from the best-of-breed vendors, software providers, and how it adds innovation in terms of delivering efficient enterprise solutions. So with that, going deep into the study of India, India historically has been a country where it was quite prevalent with traditional or foreign Wi-Fi solution technologies. But over the course of many years and until now, very recently, there's a lot of government push in terms of programs like Make in India and how it is trying to encapsulate the rich ecosystem which is prevalent today of the state-of-the-art technology providers, many of which are sitting in this room right now. A huge demand from service providers like Spectra and many others in the country, and a rich ecosystem of system integrators, OEMs, ODMs, and others. So with that, we want to go into also addressing several lenses, a lens of a service provider where Udit's going to share some insights, a lens from TIP, which is the OpenWiFi as a brainchild of TIP, and then a widely known global industry body like Wireless Broadband Alliance, where Tiago comes in. So without further ado, I'll start off with Udit. We heard on the main stage about how OpenWiFi and this journey has been a very successful one in terms of large-scale adoption. You had been a part of this journey since the very beginning. And now when we are talking about the large-scale deployments which have been done. But how would you, the question to you is, how do you see the scaling? How do you see OpenWiFi scaling? How do you see OpenWiFi expanding in terms of functionalities and diversification? And maybe it would be good to cover a service provider view, a business user view, or even extending it to a supplier overview as well.
Okay, thanks, Sandeep. So within the Indian ecosystem, we see, I see OpenWiFi scaling up fast enough because what OpenWiFi provides is a few things actually, not just one thing, but a few things. One is that it provides domestic, it has enabled enabled existence of domestic Wi-Fi equipment vendors, which did not happen earlier. Which if you just go back like by 3 years or something like that, there wouldn't be any or many domestic Indian Wi-Fi equipment providers, which there are quite a few now, and I'm sure that the number will grow. That's the first thing that OpenWiFi has allowed. Second, it has enabled the Wi-Fi vendors to come up quickly. That's been the other thing. What would usually be like a 3, 4, 5 year concept to maturity cycle is much shorter now because of that. Third, it has made it easier for service providers such as Spectra to not just procure domestically, right, which takes care of foreign currency exchange risk, etc., but also makes it easier to collaborate with our vendors, right, which wasn't an easy task earlier. India has always been a more cost-conscious market, I would say, and what we saw during the pandemic and even thereafter is with the Western suppliers increasing their prices and not being available, or the equipment just not being available because hey, who wants to sell limited inventory at $100 when you can sell it at $500, right? Kind of problems. And another thing that OpenWiFi has done is produce a viable alternative within the enterprise equipment space, right? Because when I look at the residential low-cost Wi-Fi router kind of space, there are quite a few suppliers there, like D-Link, etc., quite a few there. But within the enterprise or business Wi-Fi space, there were none actually. So this is how I think India has benefited from OpenWiFi, and I'm sure that with the increasing number of vendors, OpenWiFi is also going to benefit from vendors coming from India.
So just another follow-up question to that. How would you tie this particular development which has happened in the past 3 years, rightly put, to the incentives of the government in terms of promoting and building more indigenous technology, which is not just for India but for the rest of the world?
So, my understanding could be a little off, but the government has been supporting manufacturing or domestic manufacturing a lot over the last couple of years or so, and they have, the government has come out with the performance-linked incentive schemes for manufacturing, and that covers things like Wi-Fi equipment manufacturing and switching equipment manufacturing and so on. So and that's the additional advantage that possibly OpenWiFi as an ecosystem can get, right, from the manufacturing support from the government.
All right, thank you. So moving to TIP, and OpenWiFi has been a project group which started off a couple of years back. So Khetan, when we look at the ecosystem of OpenWiFi today, specifically from a supplier point of view, we do see that there are many Indian technology companies as well. So how, according to you, or maybe your views on how can this be further accelerated? How is this taking care of the demand in India, but also what is TIP's view of taking it to the rest of the world?
Thanks, Sandeep. I mean, I think the point is that the Open Wi-Fi community and initiative in India got a really amazing kickstart for all the wrong reasons. It got a kickstart, due to pandemic and chipset-related shortages, and I think you had this perfect storm of a growing domestic requirement along with localized manufacturing capability, and what we really were able to do was to bring a robust software stack that was kind of enterprise grade. So, combination of right place, right time, maybe for all the wrong reasons. But I think what you really had was a capability that was embraced and picked up by the domestic Indian community. I think what we're seeing, or what we saw over the last year, was kind of really rapid acceleration of capability and production and expertise. And what we're now seeing, we're just starting to see that scale and that expansion geographically. So I think the comforting thing we're seeing is that every manufacturer we're speaking to started off in order to meet a domestic Indian requirement, but they're now able to export that into other markets. I think it's, on a daily basis, we're seeing requests by customers for introductions to Indian-based manufacturers. And I think from a TIP perspective, we're not looking at it as, are we doing anything specific in India? Are we doing anything special for India? I think what we're actually doing is we're providing a community and a set of participants a place where they can meet, they can exchange good ideas, they can drive it forward, And I think that flow is both ways. I think we have an active community of Indian-based providers who are taking their capability and their expertise and they're exporting that, but we're also seeing market requirements and expertise flowing back in. And I think the next step of what we're looking to see is actually where participants and customers are building out their own unique requirements and having that developed in India and then exported out. I mean, take that natural latent engineering expertise, software development capability, and export that out. I think it's less about shipping a box, moving a product, and it's more about if we look at what India's strength is, aside from the massive domestic exposure capability market, is exporting that expertise into other parts of the world. And I think we provide a platform to do that.
Thank you, Khetan. So, Diego, with Wireless Broadband Alliance, you bring in a global overview as one of the leading industry bodies in this space. What have been your learnings pertaining to A, the Wi-Fi state of the affairs in India, and B, what is it that OpenWiFi sort of solves, not just from an Indian ecosystem point of view, but even a global point of view? And are there any learnings that can be shared from India to the rest of the world and vice versa as well?
Yeah, thank you, Sandeep. Definitely, I think there are learnings to be shared. And one thing that I really like about OpenWiFi is the ability to remove barriers and accelerate time to market. So we have the traditional way to develop standards in Wi-Fi industry. So we need to go IEEE. We discuss that, and then we go through the Wi-Fi Alliance certification, and we have discussions, and we pass the certification, and even sometimes we go to Wireless Broadband Alliance, and we do more testing. And as you can imagine, not every single company has the resources and the time to invest on these long processes that are very needed. And I see OpenWiFi almost as a vehicle to really, for innovative companies, many times from emerging markets, or even companies that coming from developing markets, but they want to have a fast entry on the market, they can use OpenWiFi as a platform. Because in fact, they don't need to go through all the entire standardization process. They have this highway to implement a product or partner with some manufacturers. They have a software stack that can pick up whatever makes sense for their use case, and they can go to market. So I think that's a huge benefit. And I can even share from the Wireless Broadband Alliance, we saw a huge time to market from the OpenWiFi community when we launched a few years ago the challenge, can you guys include on your OpenWiFi stack the Open Roaming standard? And they did it like that, super fast. It's today available for any manufacturer to implement it if they want. And I think that type of innovation to create dynamic communities like we see in India, I think should be replicated in other geographies. So, and I'm going to say emerging markets because of the element that you did mention about the cost, but I think even believe that even in mature markets, more developing countries, may have startups, innovative companies that if they want to enter on this Wi-Fi market, they can very easily set up a partnership, bring up equipment, specific use cases to implement it. One learning that I want to share, I think it's important for OpenWiFi to expand the use cases. Because when we started to enter in more advanced services for specific market niche or verticals, we all start to look into, okay, if I want to have an IoT type of service, I need this type of applications running on a Wi-Fi infrastructure. If I want, for example, to guarantee privacy or security, I need some other types of applications. So I think there is a learning part that is, okay, let's identify those use cases. Let's continue to build that stack of software to be able to expand OpenWiFi.
Thank you. So I think let's go deeper. We've heard all the good part, right? Let's just put it that way. But a session or a deep dive is incomplete without addressing challenges, right? And then how to mitigate those challenges. What are the measures that can be taken, which will be the third topic. So going into challenges, I mean, Udit, we've heard about all the, all the large-scale adoption that Spectra has done, been through this journey since the beginning. But I'm sure there's no solution in this world which is a perfect one. What have been your primary challenges that came along the way, and which sort of need to be addressed?
So the dark side of going from concept to maturity in like 5 years, the dark side of doing that in 3 years or something like that is that there are a lot of challenges, right? Which you continue to face, or which we continue to face even now. So be it in terms of the stability or the quality, right? Or the functionality, which is still continues to be a work in progress, are some of the challenges that we faced. It's just that we face them lesser every week. The good part is that, and the the our investment in terms of time, effort, money in OpenWiFi was not because it was a perfect solution, but because it was a viable alternative, right? It was viable despite its challenges at that point in time, because our view was, and still continues to be, that it's technology. It'll keep evolving, right? And it'll evolve faster and faster. So that is the sort of cycle that we're going through. So those are the kind of challenges that we still continue to face.
So, thanks for that. So, taking this to tip, right? I mean, from a community perspective, Khetan, and the community of OpenWiFi perspective, there is absolutely no doubt, like to Udit's point as well, that in the past 3 years or 2.5 years, we've really come a long way, and it's been widely deployed. But as someone who's going deep into OpenWiFi, such as yourself within TIP, from a community perspective, what are those challenges that you foresee, which are the need of the hour?
Well, I think like any community-led organization, it's a function of the investment of time, effort, energy, people that gets put into it. So I think we are, like any community, driven by who's active in the community. And I think one of the big discussion points that we have is that the value you're going to get out of it is kind of directly proportional to the value you put in. I think if you're an active and engaged member of the community, you will extract the value. Yes, I think there are challenges, as there would be for any kind of community-driven organization. But one of the big advantages that we see in OpenWiFi is that the people who can solve your problem are on the call with you. So if you are seeing that there is a particular challenge or a problem that isn't being addressed quickly enough, you're welcome to engage with them and pay for them privately to resolve your problem. I think one of the things that isn't well understood is that OpenWiFi is an open source software project, but it is licensed under a BSD license. So if an organization manages to solve a problem or manages to include a new feature or an enhancement, they can keep that as their secret source, their special IP. And I think the discussion that we're having now, and it's specifically relevant in an Indian context because of that strong and rich software engineering domestic capability, is you're able to build a feature, you're able to build an enhancement, you're able to build a provisioning mechanism, and you can close source that, and that can be your specific differentiator in your route to market. I think Tiago's mentioned that we have had open roaming support within, I think, I'd like to say weeks. Reality is probably months from when we started on it, but I think it was a fairly quick time. And I'm kind of happy to say that we will have a one-click wizard for open roaming support in the next release. I think, and that's an initiative we started in the last 2.5, 3 months. I think it's also fair to say that by the end of the year, we will have a Wi-Fi 7 capable open source Wi-Fi stack. We will have support for quality of experience in the system. And I think that's available to anyone who's an active community member. And you can choose to participate and lean in as much or as little, and that will derive the value that you're going to get out of it.
Thanks, Khetan.
Sandeep, let me just mention one thing. Just one small thing to add to what Khetan said. I think partnerships is another one. So I love to partner with TIP and with the OpenWiFi. I would love to see you guys more involved with IEEE, Wi-Fi Alliance, and any other organization that somehow look into the Wi-Fi. I think that partnership and collaboration is fundamental.
So, Diego, that brings up a good point, right? I mean, as a widely global industry alliance, you know, there are members from service providers to standards bodies to vendors, technology providers, everyone. What are those challenges, or whether it's lack of certain features, or whether it's you know, bringing better use cases which can really address, you know, which can be spread out across other global markets? What are those gaps that you see today, you know, which is worth mentioning?
Yeah, like I said before, I think for the Wi-Fi industry, there is that gap of entry into this space, because we all know there are a dozen of companies that are very large companies, and they dominate, for example, the majority of the Wi-Fi enterprise market. So I see the merit of bringing this innovation, these alternative options that the different stakeholders, either if you are an enterprise or if you are a managed service provider, or even if you are a manufacturer, that you can use OpenWiFi as a platform to go to the market with your own business case and implement the business. I think that has been very relevant, and I think we should somehow come more together and to build that community of OpenWiFi. So at the same time, OpenWiFi will not be everywhere, but it's one more tool on the toolbox that different players can use it. And I think that's quite relevant.
All right, thanks. So that brings us to our last topic about starting with Udit again. And here we are typically just talking about an Indian market where you are a service provider. What other measures, or what could be the potential, call it collaborations or call it further areas which can be tapped into, whether through TIP, whether through, you know, industry bodies or standards, which you feel is going to help in further scaling this ecosystem that you know, we've, like, TIP has managed to build in the past few years?
So a few thoughts that come to my mind is, see, if you look at what India has, right, and try and figure out how that best can be leveraged. So for example, in, you know, we have a lot of contract manufacturers, right? Is there an opportunity for TIP to sort of enable them to manufacture access points, right? You know, that will help in multiple ways. That will increase or grow the ecosystem, hardware ecosystem within the country for India, for export, and so on, right? You know, these are the kind of things to essentially look at what India can, what India has, and what is it that maybe TIP can do, right? The other few things that come to my mind is, you know, the government in India today mandates trusted source in terms of, you know, for a service provider to procure material, they have to come from a trusted source, right? Is there an opportunity for TIP to go and work with the relevant authorities and to explain to them that anybody who's using OpenWiFi or as part of the OpenWiFi ecosystem, right, is can be at least partially be considered a trusted source, so that the time to market for the OpenWiFi manufacturers could be much lesser than what it is traditionally been, right? So these are a couple of things, and then I'm sure there could be many more, you know, for how the ecosystem within India could be grown for the benefit of India and for the benefit of you know, the global market as well.
So, Khetan, picking up from this, right, what can you add, or if you can elaborate, what are you guys doing from a TIP perspective about whether this can be addressed through contract manufacturers, and how can this ecosystem be further leveraged, not to differentiate it amongst the other vendors that are there, but how can it collectively grow and, you know, through those measures, grow its scale?
So there are a couple of good initiatives. I mean, I think overall, from a TIP perspective, we are working from a regulatory and policy perspective in India. I think we have an active and engaged group that specifically looks at regulation and policy, and I think trusted source is one of the things we're looking at. I think from a what are the barriers to entry perspective, I think all the reference designs and models that we have are available. They're all online. If you're a TIP member, you have access to those. So I think the barrier to entry is relatively low. The fact that we have already 4 or 5 or 6 OEMs who are India-based, who are shipping, multiple different SKUs, speaks to that. One of the things that we are specifically looking at is kind of chipset diversity. So we are speaking to other providers of boards and reference designs to help expand the scope. I think the other thing that we're doing is that we have just successfully gotten off the ground open LAN switching. So I think here we're talking about PoE Ethernet switching, which is an area of expansion. It's not well known, but that's a community-driven initiative. We solved the AP problem. The AP has to plug into something. What is that something? Is this right for open and disaggregation? It is. So now we are, we're in a position where we have at least one OEM shipping kind of open LAN switching Ethernet switches. So again, it's not only about providing optionality and lowering price, but it's also about kind of enhancing the entire solution set because it's all managed from a single pane of glass. I think from a cooperation perspective, I think Tiago is 100% correct. We do have a good working relationship with the WBA and the Wi-Fi Alliance. Is there room for improvement? I think absolutely. I think we've committed to engaging and working, more closely together. I think that's something that we really need to take seriously. And I think the kind of final point on this is that in every discussion, context, conversation I have with an India-based solution provider, be that software or hardware, the comforting thing that I'm seeing is the question is not how do I address a challenge in the domestic market, or I'm not getting questions around how do I sell more of my product or my solution. What I'm getting is, hey, can we get an introduction to this customer or that provider or this industry body? And I think we're seeing more of that, and that speaks to the flow the other way. And that's very encouraging to see. The products are, it's a globally defined project. It's adopted and used, in a global context. And then that speaks to something that's good for both the Indian customer and the Indian base, but for those providers as an incentive to get into the space. And I think that's something we can be quite proud of.
Thanks, Khetan. So, final question for you, Tiago. We've been seeing past about 1.5 years that WBA has been venturing quite actively into the Indian community. Maybe you can throw a little bit of light on, what are the collaborations that you're looking at? How are you trying to effectively bridge this community with the Wi-Fi community, with the current Indian ecosystem?
Yeah, that's a very good question. So, first of all, I think it should start by even the Indian government. So they came up over the last years with a very ambitious Wi-Fi program and a digital program for India. I've been involved with India for a long time, and I always said the number of hotspots, public Wi-Fi hotspots in India was always pathetic comparing with other countries. So one of the biggest countries in terms of population of the world, or number 2 in the world, with so many little number of hotspots. So I think the government made that big step. With that, there is as well an industrialization program from the Indian government, and somehow that creates the basis for this telco industry to somehow start to generate some interest, some investment, and of course Wi-Fi is part of that telco. I can share that we have a great relation with the Department of Telecommunications from the Indian government. We work very closely with the regulator, and we have a quite vast number of members very committed to the charter of the alliance and very active, including, for example, Spectre and others. What I see very positive, and I see a huge evolution comparing with 10 years ago on Wi-Fi space in India.
All right, thank you. That brings us to the end of this session, but I know we are at time. But maybe if just wanted to pick for the next 2 to 3 minutes, in case there are any questions or comments from the audience, I think our panelists would love to take it. So anyone from the audience if, has any question? All right, so I think we're good then. Thank you so much, Udit, Khetan, and Diego for taking the time. And we can move on to the next session.
Soft and warm, a quiet storm, quiet as when flowers talk at break of dawn, break of dawn. Power source of tender force, generating, radiating, turn me on. Turn me on. You sure circled all my nerves, promising electric thing. You touch me and suddenly that rainbow rings. Quiet storm blowing through my life. Oh, quiet storm blowing through my life. Oh, blow, baby. Wind aside, waking my butterfly caught up in a hurricane, hurricane. Lucky me, I'm better free. Suddenly I'm caught up in your somber rain.
Are we good? Yeah. All right. Good afternoon. So good panel. First one on open Wi-Fi, and the next two panel will focus on ORAN. The first discussion that we're going to have here would be around more the Indian perspective and OEM technology perspective, and then the second session we will discuss what I call industrialization and globalization. How do you take Open RAN from a limited deployment scenario into a much broader, bigger deployment? And so maybe we start with the introduction first. Maybe, Timo, you can start. And
I can start. Yeah, so my name is Timo Jokiaho. I am Chief Technologist at Red Hat Telecom, covering EMEA region, and I have been focusing on Open RAN or virtualized RAN or RAN for easily 4 years when we did the first deployment with Rakuten Mobile already 4 years ago, even more. So, and now of course things have developed, and we are pushing ORAN and Open RAN forward.
All right, good afternoon everyone. Manish here with Dell Technologies.
Hi, I'm Munish Chabra, and I'm responsible for Redis's 5G ORAN software.
Hi, good afternoon. I'm Mehnaz Ansari. I'm responsible for US Trade and Development Agency's South Asia office. We are the infrastructure project preparation arm of US government. Thank you.
so as I introduce myself, I'm Gautam Chaibar. I most recently was with Dell, and before that Ericsson. At Ericsson, I spent 3 years in India running the region between 2008, 2011. And I make that point because I was just recently in India in July, and I was surprised at the change of attitude that I encountered between when I was running the market back 10, 12 years ago to what it is now. And what I sense in India is a huge push by the government and players in India to be a player. I think if I was to use a term, I would say that India needs ORAN and ORAN needs India. If you think about the country, it's the 5th largest economy. It's going to be the 3rd largest by 2028. It's got 1 million plus cell sites, 1.2 billion customers, and more people than all three players that are on stage today, Japan, Europe, and US. So I think if we were even to get marginal deployment of O-RAN in India, it would be significant for the technology and a huge win. So with that said, as a background, I'll turn to Manaz Force to tell us exactly what's happening on the ground, because she's been there and she understands what's going on with the government. And
Well, thank you, Gautam. And I can speak certainly from a US-India relationship perspective of what's happening on the ground. And the rest of that is spoken by the people either on the dais or in the room. And uh, not only acknowledging the fact that it may not be India per se represented here, but Indians do represent well of India, including a lot of us on the panel and in this conference of what's going on. Just to begin with, recently, last month, there was the G20 meeting in India, in Delhi, and the joint statement which came out with President Biden and Prime Minister Modi's discussion. Also a lot of elements of highlighted cooperation which we are seeing with India in the Quad perspective of the Indo-Pacific, and what we are trying to cover. 5G and Open RAN or O-RAN is at the helm of all that affairs. It's very, very important for India to gain its ground and get going faster than it has been in some of its journey coming forward, which it is rightfully doing so and is making all conscious attempts. And the other important element to note for what is important in India and with India right now is the importance of the private sector. The importance of Indian private sector, be it in the telcos or be it in other technology development, or be it in providing the skilled manpower to the world, is that India's private sector is really leading the way to how it has to be showcased to the world, which I will save those remarks for Manish to cover. But in terms of the cooperation and collaboration in 5G, O-RAN, and India also realizing a little late entry into this sphere, is also the vision laid out now for 6G, which is very ambitious. But in the ecosystem and in the market, and you highlighted the demographic importance of India, which is very critical as what we also look at. That is really the hub of where most of the people are living. And the connectivity does not sit for India. We recently hosted a 5G Next Gen workshop with India, with the Department of Telecommunications of Government of India at the helm of affairs. Most of that demographic impact which we have to look at it does not sit in the main cities. It really goes on into the second, third tier cities and the rural India, where this O-RAN will be most critical and most important. And also the importance of the last mile connectivity. We have been working on some of these elements ourselves, besides creating the trainings and the capacities of what best can come between US and India. And the last panel talked about collaboration and cooperation. Well, that's very important. We had a company like Air Jaldi, which is an Indian startup, work on the rural wireless and wireless connectivity of connecting millions of homes, which is really the importance of the digitization which is needed in that part of the world. So a lot is happening. You have to come to see and believe it.
thank you, Manaz. So one of the things I noticed when I was there in July was that the attitude is not one in which they're interested in telecom. The attitude is one in which India used to be a big consumer of telecom. Back in 2008, 2009, 10, they would ask you, what is Verizon doing? What do you guys at Ericsson think we should do? And then this time around, they were almost like, we don't really need to talk to you guys. We've got some plans. And Munish, maybe you can tell us a little bit more of what that means, because it was fundamentally different from what I noticed in the past.
That's right, Gautam. I would say in the past, in all the wireless technologies, India was a consumer, but a very late consumer of technologies. If you look at it, I think 3G, 4G, all of these technologies came in when they were already proven in the whole world. But this time around for 5G, and again, kudos to the government, to all the big operators out there, they said, we are going to lead the show. So that changed the whole equation. And that also came from the fact that in the past, so India has been very well known for the software part of it, right? India being the software, I would say, primarily services-oriented mindset. A lot of companies would outsource it to India, even a lot of innovative solutions. But now you can see the mindset changing. Why can't we develop it for ourselves, right? And that kind of, this whole consumption or picking up the technology early on, the spectrum distribution by the government and everything else around it, it has triggered, I would say, the mentality that let's create it in-house, let's create it here. The software was always from India. The software stack for whether it was 3G, 4G, and 5G, Radis has provided this software for years now. I mean, the networks which are deployed all across the globe, including 3G, 4G, and even the 5G networks, they're based on Radis's software. What was missing here was the hardware play, the manufacturing play. That's where this government came up with some of these initiatives that the previous panel also talked about, the incentive schemes. The one is PLI, which is designed outside but manufactured within India. The other one being DLI, which is designed and manufactured in India. Both of these schemes are in a way of promoting local players, also giving them a little bit of seed money through which they can create solutions out here. And as Gautam said, and by the way, my history is also that I lived outside of India for a very long period of time, and I went back middle of COVID. I was shocked to see the radio technology being developed out of India. How proud is that? I mean, it was all across between Nokia and Ericsson's always, but in fact, we're demonstrating that on our booth, one of the RU manufacturers, radio. This is a company called VVDN. Really kudos to them. They entered into this at the right time. It took time, almost 3-4 years to mature, but today they have a lot of different form factors of RUs, right from indoors to outdoors, high powers, everything else around it. So with this whole ecosystem now coming together, I can say that these solutions are ready for deployment within India and outside of India.
Yeah, no, I agree, Munish. I visit the VVDN factory in Manesar, and I was quite impressed and somewhat surprised at the scale at which they've actually created a manufacturing facility that's world class with the right level of robotics and integration with people running the factory. But India is more than just the companies in India. It's also the multinationals that operate in India. As an Ericsson guy, I can tell you that we had huge domestic opportunity by selling stuff into India, but we also had the largest Ericsson organization based in India delivering to other parts of the world. And I think, Dell probably has a similar say, but I'll let Manish tell us about what Dell is doing in India.
Yeah, I mean, look, I want to go back to your point of Open RAN needs India and India needs Open RAN. I think that's a very fundamental and good point, and I want to touch on the multiple vectors there. If you look at where the networks go, it's clear, open, disaggregated, cloud native, that's the path forward. And as I shared today in the morning, I mean, there are a number of operators who are doing scale deployments, Dish being the one that's already paved the path in there. But we need to go beyond that. And I think India presents a very unique opportunity to mature the Open RAN technology and Open RAN ecosystem. And what I mean by that is, it's one of the environments that put some of the harshest requirements on a network. Whether you look at it from a traffic coverage, capacity, environmentals, whether you look at it from the thermals and other aspects of what the technology needs to deliver, it does put those requirements. So if there is a way to bring this technology into the parts of the 5G build-outs that are happening in India, it will definitely boost the overall Open RAN ecosystem, build the confidence around that. And then vice versa, I mean, to your question and point, this tremendous talent pool that is sitting in India on software and services, historically, traditionally at scale, mostly around IT, some on telecom, but there's an opportunity to create that talent pool to really serve the needs, both domestic and for that matter, I would say even internationally, on the telecom side as the technology disaggregates. So I see this as a more win-win. Clearly, I mean, there are things, I mean, we are doing, in terms of testing, integration, work that we do as part of our, Open RAN efforts. Of course, we participate more at the compute layer, infrastructure automation, infrastructure blocks, and more. And then last piece I will say is, we need to make sure the discussion gets grounded in reality. RAN at the end of the day is a complex workload. Even when we look at radios, there is need for a wide variety of radios to meet the needs of the market, whether it's on single bands, dual, tri-bands, different band combinations to meet, and I'm again talking globally on this. So there's a lot of work that needs to get done. And what that brings to is, what are the right pieces to look at and attack, not reinvent the wheels that are well in motion and well running. Rather look at areas that really need to be developed and gaps that need to be plugged to make this Open RAN ecosystem go, both in India and globally.
No, fair enough. Fair enough. You're right. So in terms of the next layer up from you, it's a cloud layer, because there was a lot of discussion in the past that you can't disaggregate a core network because it wouldn't work. But Timo, you have a different perspective on that. Maybe you can you could talk about a little bit about what you guys have done in India.
Absolutely, absolutely. So India, first of all, is a extremely important market for us, and we are present in half a dozen cities: New Delhi, Mumbai, Kolkata, and then we have fairly sizable engineering organization in Bengaluru and support organization in Pune. So there is a brilliant software talent in that country, and that's why many of the multinational companies are there, including ourselves and our mothership as well, IBM. So it's very important that, of course, we are serving pretty much all industry segments in India and other places as well: finance and government sector and commercial segment, and telco, of course, absolutely. And we are running now Open RAN or ORAN POCs or trials with Airtel and Jio, and Vodafone Idea is more like an IT customer for us rather than network customer, but we are present in all of those places. Now, what we do specifically in our engineering in India for ORAN is kind of an interesting history. So ORAN Alliance, some time ago already, when they were architecting or building the architecture for ORAN Alliance compliant RAN, including RAN intelligent controllers and SMO and all the other stuff, they made a decision with good reasons that the RAN timing and synchronization feature has to be or is responsibility of the cloud platform. And I can tell you, I had hard times at Red Hat management with Red Hat management to convince that we need to do RAN timing and sync. Why should we do? But ORAN Alliance decided that, and that part of our cloud platform, the timing and synchronization part, is mainly done in our India R&D with precision time protocol and sync-E and getting the master clock from the satellite system and distributing the time to DU and RU, and it's all built into Linux kernel and in open source what we do. And so that's clearly what our engineering team in India is doing, and I can again tell that highly talented folks doing these things there. Now the other thing we do outside of the Open RAN or O-RAN in India, as well as other places on the planet, is that we always educate our customers and companies on what open source is and how people should do open source development. So it's a continuous education thing, and then we of course consult or advise companies, telcos specifically, how to build an small organization or big organization called Open Source Program Office to manage all the open source work. And I always need to tell a little bit about our development model, which applies all of our engineering teams in this world. We call it open source upstream first, which means it's a long story, but quickly, we develop everything straight in the public projects, public servers. We do not develop in-house. And one of the big advantage of doing that is that if we don't need to push the modifications and features upstream because they are already there. We just develop them together with our partners and competitors directly in the upstream open source projects. And there is no other company who's doing that. Everybody is doing open source in a wrong way, I may say so, which makes open source development very difficult. It's never easy, I have to say, but when you do the upstream version, it is easier. And we always need to be as close as possible to the community releases. We don't divert, we don't fork, and that's a big value for us. And telcos specifically, service providers and Ericsson's and Nokia's and other people, they continuously ask us to explain what this upstream is. And it always starts in an interesting question. They ask, telcos or these equipment providers, they ask that, so when is this, I need this feature, when is it ready and how much does it cost? And I have no idea, because we don't control the roadmaps as closed source companies do. We have to negotiate upstream, we have to negotiate with the communities, and if community agrees that, hey, this is a good feature, let's do it, then we can commit, but not before.
Thank you, Timo. So, Manaz, one of your challenges or role is to figure out how to get US companies or to benefit from what's happening in India and how the Indian market is developing. What's your perspective on how that's developing from an O-RAN perspective, and what challenges do you see there?
Well, if you had asked me the same question 3 years ago, I would have said, and thanks to Tip for bringing a lot of light to us in the government to understand where things are, I would have said that it's very complicated of where really we can bring in a minor plug-and-play role to keep things moving, because one, the landscape is very huge. The players are big and everyone is very focused on, getting their work done instead of thinking of, okay, what next and how we are getting to the next thing. So we at the mission in India, we had the US mission in India, which I'm a part of, was struggling amongst all the agencies of how to bring in this whole Open RAN discussion onto the table, which is valuable and has the right takers. I think a lot of that has changed, and that's a positive sign. We are seeing that there's a lot of engagement. Of course, if you say US companies, and Manish is here representing one of them, and so I would attribute Red Hat and IBM. They're so big themselves that there is a lot of times within the USG ecosystem that we are seeing how we are being valuable and bringing that right dialogue at the right platform. And to enable to do that, as the discussions happen, as all the telcos in India are very busy with getting their own things done and at the right time, the government is becoming more and more in an advisory role in India, which and where we come to see more collaboration is on helping that the language being spoken between the different parts of the world, including what India is developing and evolving for itself, is global. And that's where the regulatory and the standards aspects are very, very important. And that's where we see coming in and bringing in kind of a knowledge sharing platform. And in terms of US Trade and Development Agency, the agency which I'm representing, and what we are doing here, we are looking at infrastructure projects. So we are looking across the value chain. We're not looking only at what happens to the 5G development, we are also seeing, and the Open RAN, we are also seeing what happens with that development. What are the sectors it is going to impact, and what are the challenges which those sectors will have to adapt and to adopt to these new technologies and still keep moving. And hence that cutting across and the crossover, a work which I led for the US mission, was working with India on smart cities about 8 years ago. And actually, when you get on the ground and when you get to do projects, for example, which may be of interest to the OEMs or the new startups, you have to understand that the partner on the other side is also understanding and speaking the same language. And that was a huge challenge for even a city which has all the right checks and the desires to do it. A lot of times, and I was very happy to come back to Spain, because a lot of times Madrid and Barcelona were the examples which our experts from US were talking about to the Indians to bring in those smart city and the connectivity elements. So if it's a municipality does not have all the roads. It may dig the road, but to put the cables for the internet connectivity is somebody else's role, to put the power connection is somebody else's role, how the water is getting impacted is somebody else's role, and they are not talking to each other. And so, the challenges of bringing all the stakeholders on the table to understand and talk to each other and breaking the silos is an area where we have worked in. Through our smart cities, our work, through our integration of different technologies work, and now to ORAN, we are looking continuously at projects which set the benchmarks for the next 3, 5, 10 years of impact, to see how we are bringing those technologies and those services between the two countries, in this case, US and India, on the table. I can cite examples after examples, but the reason I gave smart cities is it will connect to a lot of you, that if there's a startup developing an app, the citizens of the city need to understand how to use that app, and that app has to have the right connectivity. And so at USTDA, we are continuously looking at projects, capacity, and training, working with India. A lot of this sits with India's private sector, sits with India beyond the central or the federal government, and also sits with India where you are going to take it to the next level. So if you are looking at India as a market for your growth and collaboration, look at India from where it sits in those weeds of things where your technology is going to make that difference. And one final comment I would also like to make is, for our work currently, and something which we looked at in 2014, we're talking ORAN now. We were looking at sustainable cell towers in 2014 with India, is the element of bringing that whole sustainability and greening element very much at the front and center of this conversation as India develops into a more digitized stage.
Thanks, Manaz. And TIP is looking forward to working with USTDA as we look at developing that relationship more towards the Indian market. One last question. We have 5 minutes. I'll pose it to all three of you guys. How does TIP work with India to create that objective of India needs ORAN, ORAN needs India? Manish.
I can start with it. So I think the most important part, in fact, Manish alluded to that, the requirements for India are way different than rest of the world, or at least the developed countries, I would say. The systems which are performing in Indian environment, they are exposed to like 90% load, which is normally other operators will be scared to even run that kind of load. The ARPU at which India operates is very, very low. So the TCO, at the same time, also the operating expense becomes very, very important, right? And overall, from an O-RAN perspective, the challenge that India has or other operators across the globe, they have, everybody's watching how O-RAN is being accepted today from a deployment point of view. So the challenges which are in terms of ease of deployment and operations becomes very important. And the same will also apply to India. Of course, this would mean that it's not just one OEM or one manufacturing company which can fulfill the needs of India, so there needs to be much more. And that definitely, I think TIP can help promote that environment. But I would say whatever will lead in rest of the world, the optimized form factor of that in India will actually flow back to the world as well in terms of lower cost.
Yeah, so many things come to mind, but I'll keep it to only two. Number one, when it comes to any new technology development, and in particular to your question around Open RAN, the proof's in the pudding. And to get technology moving, get it deployed, and start to prove it. So I think part A, where TIP can help, is convene an open ecosystem along with the operators and pave the way of what hurdles need to be knocked down to get these trials and rollouts done. That in itself will move the ball forward in a meaningful way. As I said, India is going through its own 5G rollouts, one of the biggest networks on the planet. Even a subset of that, if it's Open RAN, it creates opportunity for the domestic players to enter and start to build the technology. It creates opportunity for others to participate in that, but most importantly, move the ball forward on Open RAN. So that's number one. Number two, I'll say just on the technology side, just looking domestically on the needs of India, also looking at, what are the newer things that can be brought in, and TIP can again convene that ecosystem. Things that come to mind are, what does AI and machine learning on Open RAN on RIC means to India? Things like sustainability, energy efficiency, higher performance, higher throughputs, things that that country needs. They all start to come to mind to say, how can we enable that, applying newer technologies on an open platform? So I think this is where I see TIP can really broker the community and bring the ecosystem together.
Timo?
Yeah, so I want to a little bit talk about concept which the Telecom Infra project has, which is TIP Community Labs. They have many, I think 17 or 18 community labs. And I'm sure there is one in India. I don't know, but I'm sure there is. Now, I view these TIP community labs a very, very important kind of ingredient in this space. Unfortunately, we as Red Hat, we haven't done a very good job on community labs. We have one major success, which is in Indonesia community lab, but community labs are important. There might be a bit too many of those because people cannot spread their resources too much. But the community labs are important if they are kind of run well to build the ecosystem and build the partnership. And when we are together in this industry, we are building such a challenging use case like O-RAN or Open RAN, it needs big trust between the partners so that the partners, talk to each other as openly as their, business constraints allow, and trust each other and make interoperability happen. And when that happens, then also the system integration, which is a big challenge alone, would become easier when partnerships are built and different sets of components have been nicely integrated. There still is a need for system integration, there is no doubt.
No, that's a fair point. And TIP is actually looking to go one step further, where we're looking at an integration, test, and certification environment, where we think that you can't build cars by giving parts to the operator. You need to get an engine, wrap a car around it, and then give them something to drive. So with that said, I think we will stop here for this panel. Thank you, guys. I think it was a very interesting discussion, and we will switch to the next panel. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think, look, this discussion will really focus on the role of the SI because, you know, I personally believe that there's a playbook you have to make a technology successful. Global standardization is first. If you think of CDMA, it failed that check, right? Never made it past the US. Lots of R&D investment. This morning, if we were in the main stage, 3 billion Ericsson's investing, Nokia is investing 2 billion. If you add up all of the ORAN investments, it's probably in the billions as well, right? Integrated test and certified solutions, I think that's what Docomo and Rakuten is trying to do with their Docomo Orex and the Rakuten solution. They recognize that they have to bring a solution to market. And then the whole hardening of a solution once you have it, putting it in a network, making it work. And I think a lot of the trials are trying to accomplish that. But there's two parts missing that I didn't hear this morning from the conversation, which I want to explore with you guys. The fifth thing that's very important is industrializing a technology. How do you build the tools, the process, the systems, the software, not the software, the automation, to actually roll it out and manage it through its life cycle? And the last thing, and the most important, is how do you distribute it globally to decision makers who are actually going to select the technology, put it in a network? There's only 2 or 3 companies that can do that, despite what many companies believe. Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei, these guys can do that. They can do the entire 6 or 7 things that it takes to make a technology successful. And if you don't believe me, go look at WiMAX and CDMA, and you'll see that they didn't check all the boxes. So for ORAN, we have to check these boxes. And the last 2 things, industrialization and globalization, is extremely important for ORAN to be successful. And I think you guys play a part there. Although you weren't on the main stage this morning talking about that, I think you play a pretty important part. But let's put the elephant on the table. Every time I talk to an operator about SI, same question comes up. They cannot do radio. And I want to hear how you guys plan to overcome that perception that the SI companies cannot handle radio. Massive MIMO comes up all the time. Can an SI optimize a network with massive? Let's start there. Let's start, first of all, introduction, and then maybe you can, Hakan, you can start with what you think how Accenture will handle that.
Yeah, Hakan Ikmir is my name. I'm Accenture's global networks lead. Came to Accenture 2 years back through an acquisition called Umlaut, an engineering firm from Germany. Definitely a relevant question, Gautam. Accenture has defined networks as a grow engine, and then we're spending a lot of efforts into networks, and especially into the radio domain. We did investments. Now we acquired companies. One of the companies was Umlaut, then Arca, AFD-Tech, and these acquisitions have enabled us in the radio domain to scale capabilities. For sure, also in India, 70% of our workforce is in India, also in the radio domain. And the acquisitions also enabled us to deliver end-to-end, means from the planning until the network operation. We did ramp up the delivery chain, and the radio domain was the core for sure, but we also added the transmission core and the other parts.
So you're doing that for some operator networks?
Correct. The second initiative was staging, because the CTIO, the CTO, doesn't believe if he's not touching that. Ramped up in Kirkland, in Bangalore, in Sao Paulo, in Madrid, in Rome, and in Aachen, in Germany, labs, 5G labs. And we have put in everything what you have in your mind, all the OEMs, the routers, the switches, the radio units, and interconnected them. Half of the labs, the workloads are used for presentation, for piloting, and the other half is used for real projects. And the last exercise was becoming part of the network, means ORAN Alliance, NGMN, GSMA, TIP Academy, becoming part of the community.
So if I was to go to Barcelona next year, and to the Accenture booth, I'll see a demonstration of your design, planning, deployment, and network management tool set.
Definitely. We had this already this year. We had 7 out of 10 demos have been networks. And what we have done, we have developed our automation platform called Cloud Native Automation System, which has the components of the design and the planning, integration, testing, plus intelligent network operation. And recently, because of, for sure, the industry is asking for is the service management and orchestration to being able to manage Ericsson, Nokia, Huawei with another platform, with another software. And the last one is the RIG, because the industry is asking for RIG to enable the platform for Open RAN. It's in place, and for sure it is hosted also from India. It's used in all our projects.
Very good. So we'll switch to HCL. I mean, Ramesh, you can introduce yourself and tell us what HCL is doing in that front.
Yeah, thank you. Hey, this is Ramesh Sriraman. I'm working with HCL Tech for last 2 decades plus. And we have been, the people behind the big four from the mobility point of view for more than 2 decades plus, right? We have all the experiences right from product development, going into the radio, the antenna development, and up to the support of managed network services for these vendors. And so we have quite a credible experience covering the RAN domain expertise. And we've also bought the Cisco SON product into our portfolio. And so we have the SON pedigree coming from there. And from the community, I think today's discussion, when we talked about in the keynotes in the morning, the main thing that came out strongly is the person who puts together all of these things, the system integrator role and the program manager role. So I think it's very critical that we see a lot of OTICs, we see a lot of labs, community labs, tip exchange, CLs that are there. But what is the purpose with which it is being put, and what is the end outcome realized? If it is left to the audience and not given a specific direction, you may invest a lot of amount into it, but at the end of it is that industry being taken forward, the ecosystem being taken forward is not very evident. So what we think is primarily the job of SI like us, because we connect with all the segment providers and we have the end-to-end view, is to give that, the end outcome. For example, simply to illustrate, energy savings is the #1 use case that is there as stated by the operators for Open RAN, especially with 5G. The density of things that need to go in is very huge, and it's going to take a huge impact on power. But there is still not a particular standard defined, either via O1 or E2 interfaces that go down to make it happen in a standardized fashion. So there's a lot of proprietary things that are going on. There is nothing end-to-end that is available. So I think that is the role SI can play by bringing together what is needed and provide that strong program management capability and bring to bear the best of IT and telco capabilities that we have been already having, which is what 5G needs.
Sushant, how is L&T Technology planning to do this?
Sir, good afternoon. This is Sushant here from L&T Technologies. Fortunately, this is not the first time I've been asked this question, that how an SI will be playing a role where somebody likes of Nokia and Ericsson or the Huawei or the Samsung of the world have been doing it. So my standard answer, especially on the O-RAN part, has been that we do understand that why this kind of technology, for that matter, any technology gets implemented. It's like that we are trying to maximize the customer base, minimize the call drops, optimizing the OpEx, and reaching out to as many enterprise customers as far as possible. If you look into the overall O-RAN space, there are different stages where L&T Technologies or an SI can play their role. I'll start with the planning part, where if you look data monetization part, that how the entire data federation is done and all those things, everything around that, that's where as an SI summit like us is playing. He picked up a great point about the program management and all, because here we're talking about an open infrastructure, open system, and all those things. So how we ensure that all those components are actually delivering the same KPI, what ultimately an operator is looking for. Then we go into the deployment part again. So again, here, the difference what an SI is actually bringing in that, yes, we understand the entire ecosystem. It could be a frequency, it could be a spectrum, it could be understanding the how end-to-end testing can happen, how even the over-the-air testing needs to happen, the regression packs, so on and so forth, and all those things. Last but not the least is around when we look into the operations of the maintenance part. Realistically, Open RAN's benefit nobody is going to get until it is deployed in volume. And I've personally seen that, as in a lot of operators have been doing the trials here and there and all those things, but ultimately, those are not going to get the benefits what everybody has been talking about. So the benefits are essentially going to come in the volume. That is where SI, somebody like us, are bringing in all those automation things, because ultimately when we're going to manage it, deploy it many times, repeatedly and all those things, that's a value add essentially we're going to bring in. So essentially what we're saying is that our KPIs will be aligned to what operators are looking for. One, throat to check or choke, as we say, as such, and all, taking an end-to-end ownership of the entire deployment is what we can do.
Thank you. So all three of you guys believe you have the radio expertise. Now, Open RAN changes the game a little bit because it creates two levels of integration that's different from classic RAN. One is a horizontal integration between CU, DU, and RU, and the other one is a vertical integration between the software and the cloud and the hardware layer. So what capabilities have you guys built internally in the companies to address that? And then how do you wrap that with the right type of orchestration to actually then take that to a commercial deployment? Or are you working on that?
Yeah, first of all, for sure, when you have practical experience, it's helping. You know what complexity you have to manage coming from a legacy network. When then Open RAN is coming into play, then usually you have not a homogeneous landscape. And what we're usually doing is taking the complexity and trying to simplify. And that takes time. And the automation platform I mentioned is key for us. We try to automate as much as possible. It is helping then with the agile thinking and then also transforming, helping the customer that he is transforming from the legacy to the new. And I think the Open RAN initiative was very, very helpful. And the examples here to bring, usually it takes 3, 4, or 5 hours to integrate Ericsson node, to get the node up. How to do it in 15 minutes, how to do it in 1 hour. That is a good example. Or when you have network operation, here you can wait that a site is down, or you predict that the site will down and make sure it's not down. And that's a bit the idea. And I think to having the right experts also in front of the customer. You can operate a lot from near and offshore, but I think you need the right people in front of the customer to transfer whatever you do directly to the customer. It's the relationship management as well.
You know, one of the benefits of Open RAN that's been discussed is the fact that because it's software-based and microservices, you should be able to manage it operationally as well as recover in real time. You guys have built automation environments to do that currently?
Correct. We have been working, I think, in many Open RAN pilots first to understand how the vendors are working. I don't want to mention a single one because to respect everyone, we have worked with many. And we have worked in Asia Pacific, in Europe and North America on early deployments. Therefore, let's call it, we know how mature the technology is and what has to be done to make it more mature. I think from crawling to walking to running, the technology is maybe walking at the moment from the maturity level, but it's becoming more and more mature.
Yeah. So from the points that you made, horizontal and vertical integration, so we've been looking at interoperability and the testing for the labs that we have put out to do the RU to DU/CU interoperability testing. We have done that for multiple emergent customers, that's coming up in RAN area. And from the process and tooling point of view, we have this TAFG specs that ORAN Alliance, one of the focus groups, test and integration focus groups, have been putting. So we're developing test automation bundles, which basically go into the innards of the front-all specification, the WG6 cloud specification, how the O2 integration happens below. And we are developing test bundles, so to speak. So that is the automation gear that we are looking at. We are not primarily an RU/CU/DU player ourselves, but we are developing this test automation from the ORAN point of view. But from the vertical integration, we are taking a different tack, which is becoming a product supplier, a technology supplier there. So we have been heavily participating in the RIC, and my team, we are developing the XApps, and we follow the TIP RIA use cases, and we have badged and got a silver badge for one of the use cases called traffic steering. And we are present in the XApp space. We have developed at least a handful of XApps that we are going to be demonstrating in our booth here. And from the other side, the SMO, like I said, we have the platform in the HCL software arm of HCL, and they carry an SMO platform and bunch of our apps. And coming back to the automation tooling, we have a thing called NOX, Network Onboarding Exchange, wherein it helps operators to deploy the RAN workloads on a cloud infrastructure and get it certified and automated full end-to-end. And then also from an operationalizing point of view, which is very critical for troubleshooting, we have developed a cognitive troubleshooting engine that we call Blue Genie, and which is basically looking at end-to-end blueprint of an ORAN and looking into all the melt data, as we call it, metrics, events, telemetry, logs, all kinds of data, and feed it into an analytics engine, which would then look at all the correlations possible and do fault identification early on and troubleshoot the network, which is really critical, is what we believe for a multi-vendor engagement, because there's no one player who would say, hey, this is my issue, and they'll try to say it's other person's issue. Right? A lot of finger pointing possibility exists. But the ability to triage and troubleshoot and come up with a fix quickly and validate it is very critical from an operationalization point of view. Besides what the Kubernetes basic platform offers as stop and start, but you need to eventually fix the problem which is coming up in your networks. And that we have tooling from an operationalization point of view. So I think we're well positioned right from what we call as the PPTI, people, processes, tools, and the infrastructure labs, which connects all the dots, and we have the connect with all the people, right from OEMs to MNOs to hyperscalers to compute and acceleration vendors. Entire ecosystem we have connects and already working experience with them, which any other, I think SI also will have.
So you guys are committed to building the capability to take Open RAN to market.
We are layering this process automation with IP approach and not just people approach, yeah.
And L&T?
So like I said in my previous response as well, that we understand that automation will be required, not only from a deployment perspective, but also from a maintenance perspective. Now I'll give you two classic examples of this, that how we have actually implemented this or implementing this. So one example is that currently we are managing a lab for one of the OEMs back in India. And that is a lab what we have set up ourselves right from scratch. And when I say right from scratch, right from taking permission from the government, setting up the infrastructure, racking, stacking, so on and so forth and all. And that lab is around 5G and Open RAN. So essentially and that lab is being used for the actual customer deliveries as well, because there are there are more than one OEM who actually installed there and all. I won't name them and all. But definitely, by virtue of that, what we have done is that automation was required. The overall ecosystem, how the 5G or then Open RAN or SA, for that matter, eventually works and all those things. So that was one classic example. Second thing is that we recently signed a project back in UK where we are doing an indoor Open RAN implementation. So we are implementing in end-to-end. So we are the prime SI right from supplying the equipment to maintaining it, so on and so forth, and all those things. So there are certainly the automation aspects. Some of them we have delivered, or rather we have developed ourselves. And then there's a huge partner ecosystem as well, because that is where we try to leverage that. If somebody else is bringing in other, which is maybe relevant for the industry, why not use it? But those are the two classic examples, possibly I'll bring in what is live in example for us.
Appreciate it. So yeah, no, that was on my mind, the big question. Can you guys step up to that whole radio challenge? Because I know that you have the global reach. You talk to a lot of the operators, the customers, and with 6G, you have the opportunity actually of bringing IT and telco together, because a lot of enterprise applications will be important. Are you having discussions with operators along those lines yet, or?
I think in general, yes. But coming to the previous question on the, especially with the focus on India, because there was also a question on India. We have first for what is legacy and what is maybe midterm there, like initial Open RAN, or even in combination design, automation for fiber transmission. We have built in India the delivery chain. Means we have 30 facilities at 11 locations. There's a big commitment from our firm to India. We have, in combination with that, all our assets being available through and from India. And also we are fighting with the competitors on the talent, because there's a huge talent. But
how many people does Accenture have in India?
we have, the whole firm has around 750,000. It's a big firm. The network practice has 12,000. And through the acquisitions I mentioned, around 5,500 came through the acquisitions. Really people having done operation, having done design, planning, engineering, worked with Ericsson, Huawei, ZTE, Samsung, Nokia, and others. And now we're doing the massive scale through India. Means we have the capabilities in the company and doing the scale through India.
And I know HCL has.
Yeah.
How many?
Okay, number of people from telecom practice would easily be around 22,000 plus. Yeah. And we are one of the number one ESO in the India origin category. And we have been also leading the Magic Quadrant for various technologies that are applied into 5G. Going back to your previous question on 6G, there is this, from the point of labs, from the point of AI ML capabilities, from the point of cloud-based migration that we have already been doing an established cloud practice, and from the point of DevOps and the CI/CD, CT that we talked about from automation, or right down to the radio engineering, antenna development, and the R&D that is required for 6G-based speeds and feeds, and more than all of that, the government focus that we talked about in the previous session, we have got a huge intent to kind of participate in all that IP development. And there is this community model that is required, I think, which is very critical. I really liked what Red Hat Timo talked about, the upstream first that he talked about. And that is a huge mindset. And we have been participating in the community, and especially from my team, I am the person in charge for community contribution as a charter from HCL Tech. What I see happen is people are not open-minded when it comes to open source. Because they put something which is very, very bare minimum, and they don't put the key critical features as a contribution into that. We have been trying to put, from talking about myself, we have put the end-to-end traffic steering as a XApp implementation with the AML capabilities out there in the community for them to use. But the community partners who need to put their stuff in to make it work end-to-end, that we don't see. So it's a little bit dependencies that we need to work out on. But that is a critical challenge I see, because for Open RAN to move forward, the willingness to share data and willingness to let go of some control without keeping it all to yourself needs to happen, right? So that momentum will drive a lot of things, right? And that is, I think, the gap. Coming out and say, I don't want to become a system integrator of our own. That's the language that most of the operators used in the morning. I'll be the prime system integrator. but they need to live and let live, right? And say, hey, there are capabilities the other party will bring to the table. We have to be more open to that, and go that distance, right? And
The good news is that there is probably about 700 or 800 operators, and 690 of them will want some help.
exactly.
But before we wrap this up, anything you want to add? Because I think we're out of time now.
Yeah, just two things. Maybe on the 6G, what you, as in brought in a good point. So definitely everybody feels that Open RAN has got the blueprint of what 6G will need. That's where the focus has been. While we know that at the moment the adoption rate of Open RAN is slow, 6G may fast track it, but I think before that SI can actually fast track the Open RAN adoption. Definitely, as I said, 6G will come in 6, 7, 8, 10 years, whenever it comes and all, but before that. Second thing is that I think Menas brought that point about India development and all those things, and smart city thing came in. You'll not believe that we have implemented 27 smart cities back in India. So we have always believed that story that some of those things can actually be implemented and brought that across globally. So when I go and represent and tell anybody that, listen, you are talking about smart city, we have already done these many implementations and all those things. And that started way back, I think 2012 or 2013, something like that. Well, NT or L&T Technology Services started implementing and all. So I believe that then industrialization can be done starting from India, and we can take it globally.
Yeah, no, look, I'm a believer. I think 5 years down the road, they will come calling to you rather than Ericsson, Nokia. So good luck.
Thank you.
And thank you so much for having us.
Thank you very much.